by for if Peter joins.
Councillor Temperton is as well.
Sorry, Mary. Thank you. Yes. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Does any member have any interest to declare in the items on the agenda this evening? No. Item 3 is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of July 2022. Can I have someone to approve? Thank you. Anyone against? No. Right. And so on to the first item which we're holding in public this evening, which is item 5, which is to discuss and review and look to approve the proposed pricing for the town centre off-street day rate car parking charges. Damien, I believe this is in your hands.
Yours is scanning.
Okay.
Use that one, David.
That's not working either.
It is.
Flashing green.
Oh, I'll try this one. It's
Oh, that's okay. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, a few technical difficulties there. Yes, so just a couple of items that I wanted to talk about in relation to this report, please, Chairman. The first one is around the recommendation under 2.1, which actually states the 1st of October. Obviously, this meeting has been delayed recently, and that should now read 1st of November 2022, should the committee decide to move forward with these proposals. But this paper is in relation to the fees for 4 town centre car parks, so that's namely the Avenue, High Street, Bracknell Walk and Weather Way. And the prices for those car parks are reviewed on an annual basis in line with the opening of the lexicon. So just a couple of items from the report, if I may, Chair. So the usage rates that we've got, certainly over the last 12 months or so, are around about 15% down on pre-COVID levels. And we think that that's probably going to be the new norm going forward. Obviously drop-off has been fairly significant, but has recovered back to 15% of pre-COVID levels. In relation to the Avenue car park, we entered into a 40-year lease at the opening of the lexicon in 2017 for the Avenue and Weatherway surface car park. And then the council manages and owns High Street and Bracken Walk multi-storey car parks. And clearly when the council sets the car parking fees, they need to consider the fee structure from a commercial perspective alongside the kind of interrelationship with the vitality of the town centre. The lease for the Avenue car park sets the method of calculating the maximum permissible fee increases for day rate parking. High Street and Bracken Walk car park then align with that methodology in order to maintain a balance for council-run car parks in the town centre. The Avenue and Bracken Walk mainly provide for the needs of shoppers in the town centre, and High Street traditionally has been for season tickets and BFC staff parking, both of which continue to be impacted by COVID-19 and the pattern of home working. Weatherway car park provides the only unrestricted height accessible car park in the town centre.
1, 2, 3. Test it. 1, 2, 3.
And for longer stays, particularly those in relation to town centre retail workers, then we offer Albert Road car park with reduced rates via season tickets. So in front of you on the paper there are 2 options, option 1 and option 2. The first option is that rates are increased in all 4 car parks, including Weatherway, by the amount that is permissible in the Avenue car park lease. And option 2, rates are increased by a maximum of 10 pence for each kind of hour calculation in all 4 car parks for all charging bands that is permitted. You'll see in table 1 at the top of page 7.
Tested. 1, 2, 3.
You'll see at the top of page 7 the 2 options in table 1. What I would say is that the inflation levels are much higher this year than they have been in previous years. But clearly, to manage, maintain, and enhance our car parks ourselves, we also need increased revenue, as our suppliers and the Avenue lease all apply annual inflationary increases. So the options are laid out in table 2 as well, which show you the hourly rate increases for option 1 and option 2. And I would point out at this stage that these rates you'll see are comparable with some of our neighbouring car parking authorities. In discussions with the chairman last week, he asked for further information to be circulated with more comparisons, and there's a supplement paper to this, which again shows a kind of wider range of comparative car parks, and we are very much competitive with those rates which we see across the wider estate. I think that's probably enough in terms of the introduction, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are any from members. Thank you.
I'm on. Apologies, there's a definite delay with the microphones today. Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Thank you. If I go to Chris first, and then I'll come to Councillor Templeton.
Thanks. Can I just be clear about can I just be clear about what's on the table? That while option 1 shows
Do I turn mine off?
proportional increase. Where we go. I'll start again. Just to be, just to clarify, and I'm looking at table 2 on page 7 at 5.14. My understanding of that is that as the hours increase, under option 1 there's a proportionate increase. It goes up sort of 40, 50, 60, etc. But option 2, it's a flat rate increase of 10%, 10 pence across the board. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Do you want to respond?
Councillor Templeton. Councillor Templeton, you're on mute.
That's better, isn't it? Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah. I've looked at the tables, and there doesn't seem to be a real encouragement for getting people to stay longer in the town centre. And I think that was the issue, that we've only got people staying 4 hours, where in other places they go for longer, and therefore the car parks, you receive a better revenue. But also I'm also inquiring whether the buses are likely, and I think this is relevant, whether the buses are likely to put on the cap of £2 fares. Because I know cities are doing this, and if Reading City does that and Reading run our buses, then a 2 cap fare might well influence the number of people who are coming in by car. Thank you.
I don't have an answer on the buses at all. Does anyone? Good point. Andrew Hunter, do you have an answer or any input on that?
Yeah, just in terms of the bus subsidy point, we haven't yet heard from the bus operator whether they will be implementing that or not. So I think it's too early to call that one at the moment.
Oh, Chris, do you want to?
I'll use Chris's mic. So just in terms of the dwell time, yes, currently the most popular rates are up to 2 hours, so 0 to 1 and 1 to 2 hours. We're hoping, obviously, once the deck is built, then that rate will actually increase. The dwell time will increase, but yeah, that's been the case since the Lexicon has opened 5 years ago. That the most popular rates are up to 2 hours.
Councillor Hayden.
Thanks, Chair. Damien, can you just confirm that whether it's the 10p or the maximum increase, that we are still cheaper to park than the surrounding boroughs?
Yeah, so I think, as I alluded to into my introduction, there's a supplementary paper which was provided to the committee on Monday this week, and that shows a wide range of local car parks. So there's car parking details there for Camberley, Reading, Windsor, Slough and Basingstoke. And it shows us to be competitive with those car parks, bearing in mind the town centre that we have and are lucky to have now. In some cases we are cheaper, and in some cases we are more expensive, but we are very competitive, sitting probably in the middle of those car parking comparisons across a wide range of Berkshire car parks. And what I would state is some of those rates that are on there will be subject to changes, and clearly haven't been implemented as yet. You'll notice that there's a change on the right-hand side of a council who have suggested charges, just as we're doing today. They haven't yet been approved. Most of those councils will be going through a similar process in the next couple of months.
Thank you.
Any more questions on the paper?
Sorry, Chair, can I just add a rider?
Go ahead.
The other question, if we, it's a bit like council tax. If we don't increase our prices, it does hinder future price increases. That's right, isn't it? Which is why Woking have got in the situation they've got.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hayden. So 4.2 just picks up that particular point. I didn't highlight it in my introduction, but clearly if we don't increase prices this year, then the gap becomes bigger year on year. So yes, you're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Any more questions from around the room? So there are in the agenda pack there are two sets of there's two proposals, an option 1 and an option 2. And what I would like to do is to hear feedback from members on sort of which of the ways their thinking is. So rather than moving both recommendations or seeking to move both or move one, I'd like to get feedback from both from all members on where their heads currently sit for option 1, which is the maximum permissible increase to all rates as allowed in the Avenue lease, and then 2 is the increase is limited to 10p where an increase is permissible in the Avenue lease. Who would like to start?
I've got my hand up.
Sorry, Councillor Anna, I'm having to look over my shoulder all the time, and I'm relying on the treasurer to tell me when people's hands are up. So apologies, Councillor Allen.
Yeah, so I have to say I've read this paper quite carefully, and I think, given the current economic crisis and cost of living, etc., I think what might be good for the council might not necessarily be good for our residents. So I am very, very tempted to go with option 2 on this occasion. I know it puts a slightly bigger gap in in our finances, but I think actually it's quite the sensible thing to do at this time.
Councillor Barnard.
I think one of the things, and I guess we'd all be sort of kind of kidding ourselves if we didn't say this, that for what is a modest outlay compared to what you might spend in the town centre, car parking might not seem to be a particularly emotive issue, but it is. And the cost of car parking, I think, does influence and determine people. I know in this meeting the number of times we talked about the eye-watering cost of parking in Reading, and of course we're now seeing a lot of social chatter around the proposed increases in Wokingham. So for me, there are two sides to this, and I can't yet reconcile this. So on the one hand, commercially, it makes sense to increase car parking charges to make sure that we can increase the revenue. But is there a contrary argument that says that if, for example, we increase by a smaller amount, or actually, as some might call for, though, I'm not necessarily advocating this, actually freeze the charges, that the benefit, the publicity, all those things that go with making that statement to those that use our town centre, to those that invest and wish to invest in our town centre, is potentially at this time a significantly more powerful and important message and argument. Here we are hoping to, complete the necessary process to push forward the next phase, which is the deck. Is this not the year in which to say, actually, folks, we hear, what you're saying. I think, Nick, you alluded to the cost of living crisis and things that we've got, but actually it goes further than that, because what we really need to do is to maintain consumer, that's resident confidence in using our town centre, and actually attract at least some traction in terms of our understanding of what's going on, and just recognise that is there a potentially bigger benefit by either having no increase or a modest increase in terms of that sort of collateral spend. I mean, it's almost free advertising for the lexicon if there's a big story that we're either not increasing it or increasing to low level, and does that actually bring some other benefits? I'm very conflicted on this, because the economic argument to set out for a 20p rise is very straightforward, very clear, but I don't believe in car parking charges at the moment. The messaging is straightforward and clear. You've only got to look at proposals when car parking charges are increased that, one, people find 101 ways of avoiding it, to the detriment of local residents. It sounds irrational, but we know it happens. And secondly, if we're finding lower levels of occupancy, is there something about actually saying it's not going to cost more, or it's going to cost very, very little more than it did before, because actually that might charm. So I'm not sure that the all the information we had in the reports really does actually help understand what is in the best interests of our towns in the long term. So I'm genuinely very conflicted.
I'm going to go to Councillor Temperton first, and then Councillor Bettison.
I honestly think the lower the fare, the lower the rates, the better possible support the lexicon will have for local residents. And if they think that they are low and there hasn't been a big increase, or there's a very small increase or no increase, then people will feel more ownership. Hey, listen, they're doing their bit to help us. And I think that's an absolutely vital message.
Councillor Bettison.
Thank you. I think this is a difficult one to call. My thoughts are, however, this is not car parking is not something on which we can make money by law. So we are simply, covering the costs of the car park. I would hate us to have to balance a reduction, an effective reduction in income, by making those car parks less pleasant to use, on the grounds that, well, you're still getting parking and it's cheap, but shame that we're not bothering to fix the lights anymore, or we can't repaint the floor. The Avenue car park especially is, after all, a premium car park for a premium shopping centre, and we could reduce our expenditure to match a reduction in anticipated income, because we're not going to increase the charges as much as we should do, we would normally do, but we'll still upset people. And my other concern is, if we say, well, fine, the council will simply subsidise the car park, I'd like to know which library we're going to close to find the money to subsidise the car park. We have a situation where the leases that we have to pay on these car parks goes up by inflation. So we have to increase the costs. We have to pass those costs on. And much as I would love, because of the doing what we can to assist people, I'd love to freeze all sorts of things,
Is now
including
joining.
council tax. But the realities of life say that you can't do that. Now, if we don't increase this year, we're going to have to increase it by double the amount next year. Or if we don't, one day we're going to have to tell our public, as Wokingham are having to tell theirs, that because the previous administration in Wokingham tried to keep the costs down as much as they could, the new administration, being responsible, is having to double their charges. Now, I don't like paying more for anything, and I guess that counts for us all. But I would rather pay a little more every year than nothing for a long time and then whack. And so that's why I would support the higher rate, but reluctantly, but realistically. Thank you.
Councillor Hayden, then I'll go to Councillor Atkinson.
Thanks, Chair. The leader has expressed probably far more articulately than what I was going to say. But we're just as much as our residents to the inflation, which has seemed to have got worse since last week. It will affect our income. We've all had a preview of the budgets, and the budget pressures are absolutely real to the point where we are going to have to look at reducing services. And the leader said it's which library will we close? But that if we don't increase the car parking charges, we will have to make savings elsewhere. And it's probably not one library, it may well be two. Now it feels as though I'm trying to blackmail people here, but given the current financial situation, we cannot afford not to increase our car parking revenue. And besides, the headline message is we're still cheaper than other people and a better town centre.
Before I go to Councillor Atkinson, sorry, Councillor Turrell had his hand up for a period of time. Apologies.
Well, feeling it with the technical challenges tonight, or this afternoon maybe. Thank you very much, and thanks also to Damien and his team for the report that's been produced. This is a difficult one for us to get our heads around because of the experience of the last 2 years and the fact that actually the lexicon hadn't been open for all that long before we were hit with the experience of the last 2 years. I think we all took genuine pride in that day, and I think still take pride from the fact that it is such a fine place to come, for people to come, and the variety of shops, the fact that the units are let, and the whole experience, and that includes the car parking. The car parks we have here are immeasurably better than some I could name, not that great distance away. There are places where you have to go to park, and you do it because it's something you have to do, and there are places you like to go. I like to think that Lexicon is the place we like to go, but we're actually, when I look at other places where people might go out of choice, not because they're going to access education, food, or medical facilities, essentials such as that, that actually it compares very well with those locally. And I think that's an important point for people visiting Bracknell Forest who are making that choice. So I think we have a good offer. We need to protect that offer, and I have to say that with the figures, I do get the point about the level of inflation and the need, the call on everybody's purses. But my concern would be if we started to fall back in terms of this financially, then we do run the risk of a catch-up. And catch-ups are extremely painful. We also need to bear in mind that this contributes to a budget. And there are areas of council spending where the spending is discretionary. One of those is on planning and transport, what we do about highway maintenance. Now, I'm struck by the difference in income between options 1 and option 2 of the order of £300,000. That buys quite a lot in terms of highway maintenance and in terms of putting in new crossings. I believe there are 1 or 2 in certain parts of the borough that have gone in. Residents made it very clear they wanted those. If there's any road safety issues, they make it very clear that they want safety measures brought in. They come at a cost, and unfortunately, as things stand, the spending on that is discretionary. It's not like adult services or children's services, where if somebody presents with need, we have a statutory duty to do it, and we have to stump up and deal with that resident's needs. So good quality highways, good quality car parks are things that benefit. Our local highways are used by all our residents, so the benefit is to all our residents. Our car parks are used by our residents and also by our visitors, so visitors get the benefit of that, and they come into the borough, they're attracted into the borough. I think the point on the structure of the 2 options, the difference there is, I think the flat rate, I really, it is not encouraging people to look at other modes of transport, and I think that I think sends bad signals. I think it is important that if you come for some time, that the parking should reflect that. I also note that the effect on the times that people actually stay here. So I think that actually strengthens my starting off from being fairly looking at both options. I'm drawn much more clearly to option 1 because really the economic
is now
necessity
exiting
and the very difficult challenges we find, as have been mentioned by other speakers, of if we don't keep up. Thank you.
I think we've lost Councillor Atkinson again. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. I've listened to what's been said. I think we're going to be faced with some pain in making some choices in this council in the next year or so, in the budget setting, probably in the next few months. And the people around this table are the ones that are going to primarily have to put in front of our colleagues some quite painful and difficult things. I think when it comes to weighing up the difference between putting parking charges up and some of the other things we might need to reduce spending on, I think when you put it in those terms, it's very easy to say on an isolated question, I don't want to raise parking charges. But when you start to weigh the trade-offs, when you start to weigh up what else it is that we might have to cut if we don't do this, if we charge less than the inflation rate on the parking charges, then I think we're going to be coming up with rather different answers from we don't want to put the charges up. And for that reason, I think we probably do need to go with option 1, much as I'm reluctant to put up any charges.
Can I ask a point of clarification at this stage? And it's based on...
Nigel is now joining.
Oh, good for him. So my question is, we have to, in law, spend the additional revenue that we get on parking. We can't generate revenue to spend elsewhere. But with the finances as they are presented, if we did not maximise our revenue on parking, there is every risk that we would have to cross-subsidise parking from elsewhere in the council's finances. So it's not a revenue generation exercise, it's actually a revenue protection exercise for the rest of the services. Have I got that balance right? Because, you see what I mean? It's a different thing. It's like if we don't raise £300,000, we need to spend 290,000 more than we are. That would have to come from revenue elsewhere. To be clear about the position that we're in.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, to answer Councillor Barnard's question, yes, the reality is that the costs of the lease and of maintaining the car park are going up significantly by inflation, and therefore if the income doesn't go up to match it, then we will need to find funding from somewhere else in the budget to meet those costs. So yes, that would be effectively cross-subsidisation as you just referred to.
Can I just ask a point of further clarification on, I should probably ask this in questions earlier. In option 1 and option 2, does option 2 not cover the increase that we're presented with through the increase in the lease costs or the other service charges for the car parks themselves? So if we went with option 2, would we actually be in a position where it's costing us, it would cost us subsidy from other services, or does that figure at that rate still wash its face? Or is that something we need to go into private session for?
Yeah, if I can get my microphone working. Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, option 2 would not cover the increases that we would see as a result of not just the Avenue lease increases, but the increases that we have on utilities, on fire alarm systems, on our parking management contract, on our staff increases, on all the increases that we are facing in running and managing those car parks. Option 2 does not cover those costs.
Councillor Atkinson, are you still online? If not, I'll go to Councillor Hayden. Councillor Hayden.
Thanks, Chair. I put my hand up, but hoping that Stuart would also come in before me, which he has done. But it is to make clear that we don't make a surplus on the car parks, and increasing the car park revenue is to actually help manage our costs, which is very, very important to us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson, are you back?
I am. Can you hear me, Mark?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I think most of the points that I wanted to raise have already been raised, particularly by Councillor Turrell, and the question that you just asked about cross-subsidising with option 1 and option 2. I think, having heard the discussion and the fact that option 2 wouldn't cover the costs, I'm more leaning towards option 1. Thank you.
Does anybody want to add anything else?
Mark,
I've got my hand up.
Councillor Temperton. Sorry, who else was that just speaking? Councillor Temperton.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, having listened to all the arguments, obviously we do not want the car park to not bring in enough money to cover the costs and all the rest of it, and revenue have to be taken from some of the other services because of it. And so listening to all the arguments, there's no doubt about it that the increases have got to happen, and I guess it'll have to be 2 if that's the only alternative to cover the costs of what is needed.
Sorry, can I just clarify? So you're saying option 2, but option 2 doesn't cover...
Oh, sorry, I meant option 1 because it's option 1 which is the one that covers, and you just said that option 2 didn't. I apologise. It's the one that covers the cost of the increased utilities, increase all the maintenance and the lease.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify that, Councillor Temperton. Just lots of confusion with technology today. Does anybody else want to say anything?
Therefore, having listened to the arguments, propose option 1.
I was going to say, can I add mine? Because I haven't spoken yet.
Oh, haven't you? Oh, all right then, Mark.
Very kind of you, Councillor Barnard. Thank you very much. I came into this meeting with a clear view of, as an authority, one of the things we've always said is that we want an economically viable and attractive and an active town centre, that we want to do all that we can to support and encourage and nurture and create a town centre destination that is still the envy of everybody else, and I still think is bucking the national trend. I came into it also with a view that we're facing massively inflationary pressures, not just as an authority, but retailers, shopkeepers, shop users, residents most especially are being hit left, right and centre with cost of living. I reflected this morning on the announcement from Next on some of their trading forecasts for the rest of the year, and some of the announcements from other bellwethers like John Lewis, who have made a thumping loss in the first half. But as much as I'd like to come in, and my viewpoint was very much, well, we should do all that we can to probably freeze rates or go for the smaller increase. And I think my viewpoint has changed, and I think it would be useful on reflection if we'd also, and I should probably pick this up in the preamble with Councillor Turrell last week, is to actually have had more of the line in here that says where the cost recovery element would have come from. And I think for future reports like this, and we're going to go through this again year after year, actually presenting us with the figures that say this is the income line that we're looking, if we do X, it will increase by this and we'll get income of this. I think what would be really useful for the future is whether it's not the actual figure, but an indication of whether or not it washes its face. Because I think when you put that piece of evidence into the mix, it changes dramatically the conversation. Because if you go in with a piece that says, when you look at it and go, ooh, £500,000, on paper to residents, that looks like an insane increase of income, whereas everyone would want none. But if the costs that we're facing across the car parks that we own, with the upkeep, with making sure there's still a premium offering, with the leasing, with the insurance, with the costs of running the car park, with lighting, with the alarm system, with everything else that goes with it, we still need to make sure that those car parks are safe for residents to use and are attractive for them to come distances for. So when I came into this, it was looking at a lower figure or a zero figure. But I think also that residents have come to expect from this authority that we are responsible when it comes to money. And I think it's that wider aspect of looking at something from that point of view of responsibility and saying we must look at not ensuring that we're providing a loss or a detriment in other service areas by having to cover the costs of this service by taking it away from libraries, for example, or community facilities or leisure facilities or anything else that we do. So reluctantly, and it is a really hard decision, it's probably one of the hardest decisions we've made through this committee since the early stages of the reconstruction, the regeneration started. Unless anybody else has anything they want to say, I would, with a sense of reluctance and reflecting that it's a very hard decision, propose option 1. Councillor Turrell, thank you. Anyone not supportive of that in the room? Great. Thank you, colleagues. I appreciate that this is probably going to put pressure on next meetings as in terms of delay and the rest of this one, but I felt it was really important for our residents, for them to understand where all the thinking was and all of the factors, and to give this a good airing rather than just to make a decision. So we shall move on. And before we go into before we move into the next item, which will be to go to closed session, I would like to introduce a slightly light-hearted but very serious extra item of business, and I do so because this is the Chief Executive's last Regeneration meeting and almost his last meeting as Chief Executive of this authority. And in doing so, I would like to propose that we note a formal vote of thanks, thank you, to the Chief Executive for all of the work that he's done on behalf of Bracknell Forest residents in his time and tenure as Chief Executive. That's a general point, but more specifically, it's appropriate that we do it here at this committee because I think it's important that residents will never truly understand the work that a Chief Executive does half the time, because it's the councillors that get beaten up for the decisions that we make, and I'm sure we'll get beaten up for the decision we've made tonight. But I wanted to mark my thanks, my personal thanks, and I hope the thanks of all the committee, because as we're sitting here talking about the success of the town centre, the usage of the car park, the amount of people that are coming in, when we look at the second half of the agenda with some of the items that we're discussing on there, that is due in no small part whatsoever to the incredible work that Tim Whedon has done as Chief Executive behind the scenes, with his relationships, with the work that he has done and his officers, but primarily with Tim as Chief Exec to get us here. And I think if nothing else, we take away two important messages or two important tests that Tim taught us all of, if I take an action, does it get us closer to the goal that we're trying to achieve? And we changed it for the modern setting. But if we take this goal, does it move us closer to regeneration? And if we don't do this thing, or if we do this thing and it doesn't come off as we want, do we end up closer to where we want to be? And I think those two tests have stood the test of time for what we do with the town centre, and most importantly, are important lessons for us all now on some of the decisions that we make on other things. So, colleagues, I'd like to thank Tim publicly. I'd like to ask Derek for a vote of thanks to be recorded in the minutes of the public section of this meeting, reflecting the thanks of this committee to the Chief Executive as he goes off into what we all hope will be a very long and restful retirement. Yes, well, I think it's a given that we're expecting the Chief Executive to come back and shop in Bracknell.
Yes, if I can just say, Councillor Brunel Walker, that first of all, thank you very much for those words. It is true. I did spend a lot of my career working on the town centre in Bracknell. But as I've said repeatedly, it was very much a team effort, and a number of the team are actually around the table or on the screen today. It's not something that any one person could have done. But I will say that since the lexicon was built, then my whole family have changed their shopping habits, and instead of going to Cribbs Causeway from Newbury now, we always go to Bracknell, of course.
I would expect nothing less. Thank you, Tim, and very much enjoy your retirement, and hopefully it's long and restful. And we look forward to seeing you continuing to make the journey up here on the M4.
I will.
Right, thank you for that. So I think if we now like to move into the closed session, are we happy to take that as read? Derek, if you'd like to move us into closed session.